41% of the people alive today will face a cancer diagnosis. But cancer does not have to be a death sentence. There is hope. Every day, there are more discoveries that could someday eliminate or greatly reduce cancer during our lifetimes. Welcome to the Cancer Truth Chronicles with Ty Bollinger. This hour, you'll be introduced to some remarkable medical experts that will tell you about prevention, treatments, and tips to stay healthy. Now, here is your host, Ty Bollinger.
Welcome to the Cancer Truth Chronicles. I am Ty Bollinger, your host, and I really appreciate you tuning in today. I got a question for you guys out there. Do you understand how the immune system works? I mean, when I was in high school, I remember learning about red blood cells and platelets and white blood cells, heard terms like antibodies, antigens, lymphocytes, leukocytes, and so on, but I honestly didn't really learn a lot about the immune system. It was actually after high school, after college, when I began to do medical research on my own, that I began to really learn about how the immune system worked. The immune system is really the key to staying healthy. It's the key to fighting cancer. It's the key to fighting all degenerative diseases. The immune system is kind of like a complex network of trillions of immune cells that all protect the body from constant exposure to the bad boys, the pathogens. And if your immune system is functioning properly, your body is going to stay healthy. It's only when your immune system is compromised, it's not working the way it should, that we succumb to sickness and disease. It's with great pleasure today that I introduce our guest. His name is A.J. Lanigan. He's a pharmacist with over 20 years experience in various disciplines of immunology. He is an expert in medical ozone and has developed the most potent beta-glucan available. As a matter of fact, I just took my daily dose of Transfer Points beta-1,3-D glucan right before we came on the air here. A.J. formed his own company in 1980 with a focus on health-related fields. In 1990, he designed and placed in hospitals and medical practices numerous low-cost ozone generators suitable for medical use, and he is considered to be an expert in ozone therapy. He is specifically an expert in this area when it deals with the immune system and the increased cytokine production that is applicable to medical ozone. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's a very fascinating field that we'll talk with AJ about. He also developed a manufacturing process for beta-1,3-D glucan, which I just mentioned, which is a carbohydrate molecule that enhances the functioning of the macrophages, and also it's a very affordable supplement, which is unlike several other brands of the beta-glucan. We're going to talk about beta-glucan today. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce AJ. AJ, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm looking forward to talking about ozone and beta-glucan, the immune system, all that good stuff today.
Well, Ty, thank you. It's a real treat for me to be on the show with you. I've heard a lot of great things about the help that you're giving to people, helping them to understand. I'm a big believer in education, helping people to understand, all the ins and outs, all the pros and cons, and in that way, as they should, they can be their own best advocate. I mean, I'm just look in the mirror. Nobody's going to be a better advocate for you than you. And so I really applaud your efforts and hope that your audience appreciates the hard work and effort that it takes to bring information in a clear and concise manner. So let's get started. Let's give them a checkup from the neck up.
It's funny. I was watching one of your videos this morning, and you said that, and I was thinking, I hope he uses that term, the checkup from the neck up today. So good deal. You already used it.
Don't fix it if it's not broke.
Okay, great. Well, I'm with you on the education. That is the most important thing. Knowledge is power, and in the Bible it says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." They perish for lack of knowledge. So a lot of people are dying today because they don't know stuff. So let's help them know some stuff today. I want you to go into yourself and your background and a little bit about how you got involved in the field of immunology. Exactly, what is immunology?
Wow, boy, background. When you get as old as I am, you hate to recount all that stuff. But let's go back to when I was really, really, really young. I'm talking preschool. My most favorite guy in the whole world was my grandfather, my mother's father. We went everywhere. We fished. We played. We did so many things. It wasn't that my mother and father neglected me, but, they both worked very, very hard. We lived on a small farm. My dad worked for the railroad. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but, tending to a farm is a full-time job in and of itself. But my grandfather, he was, I was always in his shadow. Unfortunately, he contracted prostate cancer. And back in the 50s, there was very, very little to do when you got that form of cancer. Of course, they gave him the full standard of care, radiation and whatnot. It ended up spreading his entire body. I can remember when basically they said, look, we've done all that we can do. It's time for you to, get your affairs in order. Well, that meant coming back home, and I can remember my mom giving him shots of morphine, Dilaudid. I mean, the real heavy stuff. And it was a picture that, as a young person, I was sitting there watching it, but really didn't understand the scope of what was going on. And ultimately, one morning, I went in to get him for breakfast, and he was kneeling by his bed, as he always did every morning to start his day with his prayers. And unfortunately, he was room temperature. And so that was my earliest remembrance of cancer, a horrific disease.
Yeah.
And fast forwarding to Tricky Dick. Tricky Dick promised us, President Nixon, that we'd have a cure.
The war on cancer.
Years. And of course, he must not have been a math major, because it's been more than 10 years since he left the bully pulpit. And I don't know that we're, frankly, any closer to a cure. In fact, this is something I'm in tune with each and every day, and I'm quick to tell you there is no cure for cancer, nor is there a cure on the horizon. With all the technology and things that we have today, the best we can hope for is early detection. And then with early detection, possibly we can get ahead of the curve. Well, realizing, as I did, as I, became a young man, I started the pharmacy school, University of South Carolina, in the early 70s, listening to pharmaceuticals and listening to chemo and radiation and listening to all the things. Even my key professors back then explaining to me that a lot of the drugs that were being developed and given were in effect trying to overcome some of the side effects of drugs that had been given 10 and 15 years earlier. So my mind snapped back. A lot of people that know me well know that my father's father was a famous moonshiner from the suburbs of Columbia, South Carolina at the turn of the century before last. And my dad, born in 1910, used to run that moonshine. And it wasn't run through a radiator either, my friend. They used good copper tubing, and so it was the best of the best. And so I come by some of my chemistry and biology genetics by way of several generations. But my dad, when I asked him one time what liquor tastes like, he said, boy, that stuff's for selling, not for drinking. And when that professor back in 1971 told me about the fact of the ill effects associated with a lot of the medications, I'm thinking to myself again, this stuff is for selling, not for drinking.
Wow.
And so
Well, that's
it's
a great
always
analogy.
in the back of my mind, well, wait a minute now, if modern chemistry is not going to be the salvation in regards to these incurables, how is it that man has survived through the millennia? And suddenly it dawns on me, and over time it's dawned on a lot of people, the answer's inside of us, Ty.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is the immune system. The immune system has overcome plagues and wars and chemicals and poisons and continues to do so today. And so it only made sense to me, let's do what we can do to make the immune system be all that it can be.
Right.
And at the end of the day, let the chips fall where they may. And that's really just, an abbreviated life story on what brought me to where I sit today on the phone with you, convinced more than ever that the immune system is one of the key elements that has to be attended to for you to expect a long life with reasonably good health. So you're not suffering. They use the term morbidity is significantly reduced. And I think anyone who is not aware of the importance of the immune system, I use an analogy kind of like brushing your teeth. Mm-hmm. I ask people, do you brush your teeth? Well, yeah, I brush my teeth. I said, well, why do you do that? And they look at me kind of funny. He says, well, so my teeth don't fall out, and my gums don't, get diseased. Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing you can relate to the immune system. If you think you can go through life ignoring your immune system as if you might ignore your teeth, one day you're going to need it, and it's not going to be there to serve you.
Mm. That's a great analogy, AJ, and I love that quote about the moonshine. That stuff's for selling, not for drinking. And I love the way that you tied it into the cancer treatments, because I agree completely. As a matter of fact, there have been, and I'm sure you're aware of these studies of oncologists that have been surveyed as to whether they would submit to chemotherapy if they were diagnosed with cancer, or if a loved one were diagnosed with cancer. And anywhere from 80 to 95% of the oncologists typically say, no, I would not submit to chemo or radiation, or not specifically chemo, if I were diagnosed with cancer. So I think they subscribe to that stuff's for selling, not for drinking policy as well, don't they?
Well, I agree with you, and I've talked to a lot of those folks personally, and they share their personal views. I believe, Ty, that we will come to a period in time. It may not be in the next couple of years. It may be 50 years from now. But we will look back in history at things like chemo and radiation as ignorant and barbaric as we look back 200 years ago, when the entire world's most educated medical community said bleeding was the ticket. We're going to get those bad humors out of you.
I agree, AJ. I think that we're going to look back on this time as the dark ages in medicine, specifically.
It's just barbaric, and again, as we make greater and newer discoveries, and as we explore genetics, I am convinced, as much as I'm sitting here talking to you today, that the future of medicine lies in a combination of genetics and immunology. Those will be the primary tools by which we will use to diagnose, pre-diagnose, and treat, prevent whatever, and giving, again, the best chance of our lives being extended and our quality of life being the best that it can be in the meantime.
I agree, AJ. Couldn't agree more. We are up on a break here, folks. We're talking to AJ Lanigan. We're going to be right back with some more fascinating stuff. Stay tuned.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to The Cancer Truth Chronicles with Ty Bollinger. If you have a question or comment about the show, please send an email to Ty at cancertruth.net. That's TY at cancertruth.net. Now, back to today's program.
Welcome back to the Cancer Truth Chronicles. I'm your host, Ty Bollinger, and I want to please encourage you to support our sponsors. That's the only thing that keeps us on the air. I'm just sitting here right now, before we got back on after the break, drinking a little bit of my royal tea, which is, I'm actually doing a 5-day juice fast here with my wife. We're on day number 5, so I'm thankful that I'll be able to eat again tomorrow. But sitting here sipping on the royal tea from the Wolf Clinic, one of our sponsors. They make some fantastic detoxification products, as well as a great far-infrared sauna that I lay in every night. So just please support our sponsors and keep us on the air here. Now, we're talking to AJ Lanigan and having a fascinating conversation about the immune system. So, AJ, we were talking over the break, and I want you to, if you could, I know this is a big task, but in a few minutes, Give us Immune System 101 course. If we were going to go and learn the basics of the immune system, what do the different terms mean? What is the immune system? Can you do that for us in a few minutes? I know that's a big task.
I believe I can. I like to use a lot of analogies. So for the immune system, let's think in terms of an army. An army's job is to protect, to find things. When they're not friendly, their job is to destroy. Now, the first rule of a good immune system is do self, no harm. So your immune system should not be doing anything, anytime, to hurt you, as it is confronted by different chemicals, different cells, whatever is not self, S-E-L-F. Then its job is to kill it, blow it up, get it out of there. Now, think of this immune army, first of all, in the massive numbers, not millions, not billions, but trillions of white blood cells. These white blood cells are everywhere in your body. Now, the immune system actually has more cells than any other system of the body. It has more cells than the skin. Yes, the skin is the largest organ of our body, but it doesn't have as many cells as the immune system. Our brain and central nervous system has many, many cells, but not as many as the immune system. The reason the immune system has so many cells is because it is responsible for protecting every other cell in the body against those things that are in us, on us, and around us, trying to get us all the time. Now, as we're speaking, have everybody hold out their two arms, okay, the left and the right arm.
I'm going to do it too here.
If you're of any age, some of you might have a scar on one arm or the other where you got your smallpox vaccination. Now, we haven't had any smallpox vaccinations in over 35 years. And anyone who got that vaccination, well, that vaccination is long worn off. And that's probably the simplest thing that people would understand in regards to immune therapy is being vaccinated, whether or not it's a vaccine for the flu, a childhood vaccination. And basically what they're doing is they're shooting some sort of a bug or bug parts into you, and your white blood cells then discover these and carry the information over to what we call T cells. Now, the T cells are like your 4-star generals of the immune system. They really don't get involved in the fighting. They simply receive information, and then once they're done, then they delegate information to 2-star generals, which are your helper cells. Now, you've got a helper cell subset 1 and a helper subset 2. Helper subset 2 runs the humoral side, or the B-cell antibody side of the immune system, which are basically reconnaissance officers. They're looking for stuff, and when they find it, they create antibodies that stick to it, kind of like the club that sticks to your steering wheel that makes it difficult for the thief to grab it in a hurry and run off. Well, antibodies, they really don't do a great job killing, but they do slow down the bug until the other side of the immune system, what's called the cell-mediated immune system, has an opportunity to catch up. Now, the cell-mediated side of the immune system, that's where you have your macrophages, your natural killer cells, your neutrophils. Some of those, what we call innate and non-specific cells, they simply say, do you belong here? Are you self? If the answer is no, then bada bing, bada boom, they get rid of it. But then we have other types of cells known as cytotoxic T lymphocytes. They're like trained ninja. They have specific pictures of certain things. They'll look at herpes 1, and that's the only thing they're going to destroy. Another subset will only look at cytomegalovirus. They'll walk right past herpes 1 and only attack and kill. So it is a very, very complex orchestra where the left and the right sides of the immune system, working in concert with one another, will launch the best attack depending upon the challenge that you're confronting. Now, let's talk about cancer for a second. Cancer, of course, starts off as self. Healthy human cells that for some reason mutate, and instead of having a certain lifespan, all they do is multiply and eat, multiply and eat, multiply and eat, multiply and eat. Whereas a healthy cell, it subdivides a certain number of times, and then apoptosis, or programmed cell death, lets that cell die. Not so with cancer. There's no apoptosis or programmed cell death in the mix. A second problem is usually the immune system is blind to cancer. There's a very, very small subset of immune cells that have any possibility of seeing cancer. Now, this brings up the topic of our beta-glucan product. The research has shown that these massive numbers of immune cells have a unique, what we call receptor site. Now, a receptor site, think of as say a key slot, like you stick your key in to crank your automobile. Well, our immune cells that have these receptor sites are activated by our beta-glucan molecule. Among the many things that happen, and there is literally cascades of events that can go on, but one of the most important things is now your neutrophils, your macrophages, your NK cells, arguably over 80% of the cells that previously could not see cancer will now see it and kick its butt and get it out of there. And that is probably one of the most marvelous and incredible discoveries over the last decade. Now it's all about, perfecting the materials and getting them out to the people, getting them dosed properly. But again, our immune system is there to protect us against all things, whether we understand them or not. We've made it for decades and centuries, not even understanding that we had such a thing as an immune system. But now that we know it, and now that we have tests to measure it, and now that we have tools like beta-glucan that can literally, based on a dose per body weight, move your immune system and improve it to your liking. You can get up in the morning, Ty, and take a particular capsule and raise your immune response from, let's say, 31%, which is considered normal, to 35%. You take a second pill, you raise it to 40%, a third pill. So you literally can pick the level of immune response that you want, whether you understand it or not. It works every time.
Wow, that is fascinating information, AJ. I've never heard the immune system described in terms of the 4-star generals, the 2-star generals, the ninjas, the recon. I mean, that was really well put, and I was actually sitting here taking notes while you were going through that. So thanks for sharing it that way, because I think that's really going to help the listeners to understand the way that the immune system works, as you said, as a complex orchestra with both sides working in concert with each other. So I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's going to really help people to understand more about the immune system. And then when you started to talk about cancer specifically, as you know, that's the topic that I've done most of my research on. Not only do we have, all of us have immune systems that are compromised due to a number of reasons, the toxicity that we're dealing with and the stress and so on. But so the immune system is not only compromised and is not able to fight the cancer like it should, but it's also, as you've just mentioned, blind to the cancer in a lot of instances. And so the beta-glucan actually makes the cancer cells visible to those immune cells so that they can go in and, as you said, kick its butt. So that's a great explanation. We've got another break. I can't believe we've got another break here, but we got to come up on another commercial here. And then when we come back, we're going to go in and talk a little bit about the Hong Kong study and specifically the activity of beta-glucan molecules on tumors. So we are talking to AJ Lanigan, Hope you're having a learning experience here. I hope you're getting a good checkup from the neck up, as AJ said earlier. And we're going to be right back. So hold tight, and we'll be right back after this break.
You are listening to The Cancer Truth Chronicles with Ty Bollinger. If you have a question or comment about the show, please send an email to Ty at cancertruth.net. That's TY at cancertruth.net. Now, back to today's program.
Welcome back, folks, to the Cancer Truth Chronicles. I'm Ty Bollinger, your host, and we are having a great military talk with AJ Lanigan. Before the last break, he gave us a quick synopsis, an Immune System 101 primer, and really gave us an interesting analogy of the immune system being like generals and recon and ninjas and different elements of an attack army. So I thought that was fascinating. And as I said, I'm looking at my notes here for the show, and I've got chicken scratch all over it trying to record what AJ just told us. I'm sure I'm going to be going back and listening to the archives of the show to fill in the blanks. So AJ, as we were talking about over the break, I want to get right to it. We've only got a couple more sections left, and I don't want to waste any more time. I want to talk a little bit about the Hong Kong study. I was reading about that this morning, and the results are really fascinating, specifically regarding the effectiveness of beta-glucan on tumors. So could you kind of go into the Hong Kong study, which was actually published in the Journal of Immunology, and I don't have the date on it, but here we go, 2004 Journal of Immunology. So AJ, could you tell us a little bit about the Hong Kong study?
Yeah, this information has been fomenting for 50 years. It was 50 years ago that some scientists sprinkled a little bit of beta-glucan by way of cell wall of Baker's yeast into a test tube with white blood cells and said, would you come and look at this? You know, most people think that eureka is the most spoken word with a new discovery. Well, nah, it's, hey, come and take a look at this. And they found that the white blood cells really got busy and doing what they were supposed to be doing, more, better, faster, in the presence of the material. It wasn't until 1968, until Nicholas DeLuzio at Tulane University first isolated the beta-1,3-D glucan molecule and found it the responsible material for all that busyness that the immune system was now doing. Now, the Hong study, and by the way, this is published by way of the Journal of Immunology, University of Louisville, the James Brown Cancer Center there, involved in this study. And what they were able to prove is that in the presence of our material, the beta-1,3-D glucan, that the material was taken up in the gut by what's called the Peyer's patches. This is the specialized cells in the first couple of feet of the small intestine. And these cells literally pull the beta-glucan particles into the gut through the wall, and this is the first time that the immune cells actually see our beta-glucan particulate. Now, we've got a group of cells called phagocytes. Phagocytes are cells kind of like a Pac-Man. They gobble things up, and once they're internalized, then they start to digest them. Well, in the way of our material, as they're being digested, the immune cells are moving throughout the body by way of the lymph system, through the tissues. They start out in the gut, but they could end up in the lungs, in the spleen, even in the bone marrow. And as they're moving around the body, Ty, they are secreting a water-soluble version of the glucan, and that is what actually binds to that glucan receptor that we talked about earlier. Now, that receptor technically is called the CR3, or complement receptor number 3. Now, here's the exciting thing about medicine of the future. We've been able to develop what's called monoclonal antibodies. Remember, antibodies most people would know about by way of getting vaccinated against a particular bug. But we've been able to take and grow specific cancer cells and get those cancer cells to be tagged by these monoclonal antibodies. They pass up everything else and just tag the cancer cell. Now, remember all those cells that I told you that were oblivious, they were blind to cancer?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when our material is given, a second compound known as complement, and it's complement with an E, not an I, also sticks to the cancer cell, and that attracts those, not millions, not billions, but those trillions of white blood cells that previously were sitting on the sideline. Now they are rushing to the site, and the site, of course, are the cancer cells, and destroying them en masse. Now, that's an oversimplistic explanation, but we started determining that this was the way, or what we call mechanism of action, a dozen years ago. Now, one of the key things that your listeners need to understand is that before this is going to be perfected as a drug, as an injectable, it's going to be some more years down the road. But in the meantime, the orally dosed product sold by Better Way Health, who, by the way, I want to throw a big thank you out to the folks down in Atlanta at Better Way Health, and also Marilyn and her gang at Transfer Point up in Columbia for making it possible for you and I to hook up. They're real national treasures, and they work very, very hard to do what you and I are doing right now every day by telephone and everything else. That is educating people.
Yeah, they're great folks.
Yep, and getting a material, you can't just go down to the grocery store and buy some baker's yeast and eat it. It has been
Okay, you know what, AJ? Now that you mention that, let's step back for a second. And by the way, it's actually the Hong study, not the Hong Kong study. I saw a Hong, and my mind automatically says Hong Kong, but it's the Hong study. He was actually one of the doctors. But what exactly is beta-glucan? How do you derive beta-glucan? Let's step back and explain that real quickly to folks.
Sure. Glucan is a specialized type of carbohydrate, a complex carbohydrate, a fiber, if you please. You can find it in oats. You can find it in barley. It can be found in certain seaweeds. In the Far East, in Japan, mushroom is the most famous source for glucans, and they've been drinking mushroom teas and consuming it as a medicinal for 3,000 years.
Great
Here
stuff.
in the United States, baker's yeast is probably one of the more predominant. You know, we bake a lot of bread. And so it is found that because all of these are fungal forms, now not the wheat and the barley, but I'll digress a little bit, but the forms coming from baker's yeast in particular have the highest biological activity. So what we do is we take the baker's yeast and we highly purify. We remove all the fats, we remove all the proteins, leaving behind an ultra-pure complex carbohydrate, where the majority of that carbohydrate is going to be our beta-1,3 glucan. There'll be a little bit of chitin in there, a little bit of collagen, but the majority of it, say 85% or better, is going to be pure glucan. And that is the one molecule, the unique key, if you please, that fits the switch, the receptor, on the surface of these trillions of white blood cells that activate them and put them into duty, where otherwise they're just sitting on the sideline watching the game and not really helping you.
Okay, yeah. Very good explanation there of that, AJ. I appreciate that, because I know a lot of folks were just going, okay, what is this beta-glucan? So, and I do want to say something too. The folks down at Better Way Health are fantastic. They're one of our sponsors, and the product is the Transfer Point Beta-1,3D Glucan. As I mentioned earlier, I take it every day, and it's just actually within the last probably 6 months that I've actually learned about the effectiveness of the substance, and I'm learning even more every day now that AJ has sent me some of his research. Fascinating stuff. Well, it's a product that my family and I are going to be including. I'm already taking it, but my family's not. But we're going to be taking this every day as part of our preventative doses of these natural substances that have a tremendous effect on the immune system and the immune system's ability not only to heal, but to actually initially recognize the pathogens so that they can heal. That's a missing piece, I think, of the puzzle. And a lot of these substances is that the immune system's got to be able to, specifically with cancer, got to be able to see the cancer before it can attack the cancer. So, great explanation there, AJ. We've got about 4 minutes before the next break. This show is just flying by. It's hard to believe that we're almost done. But I want to talk a little bit about medical schools and their teaching or lack thereof concerning chronic disease, infectious disease, healing processes, and so on. How is the immune system related to these diseases, and are doctors today getting a good education at the relationship?
Ty, the major problem over the long term has been lack of tools. The doctors, gosh, way back when Jenner first figured out how to do the smallpox vaccine, that was really the first and remained the only tool in the field of immunology that existed. And without tools, you know, what's the doctor to do? What does he prescribe? What is the standard of care? Now the immunologists over time were able to start measuring things better, but they really didn't have the tools necessary to make a change in the immune system, with the exception for decades using the vaccine. That is changing. That has changed dramatically over the last decade. The ability to understand and create in a test tube, if you please, things like monoclonal antibodies that will tag specific targets. They got a monoclonal antibody that doesn't tag anything but head and neck cancer. They got another one that won't tag anything except non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They got another one that won't tag anything except, you name it. I mean, there's hundreds of different kinds of cancers, and then there are many mutations. This is an incredible tool. A lot of your listeners will have never heard of monoclonal antibodies, but I bet they've heard of Martha Stewart. I doubt you've got a listener who doesn't know who Martha Stewart. Well, a couple of years ago, you remember Martha had to do a little bit of time in her multi-million-dollar estate with a bracelet. Well, the reason she had to do time was they found that she was doing some illegal trading on a stock called M-Clone. Well, M-Clone held the license for a monoclonal antibody for colorectal cancer known as Erbitux. And Erbitux, it cost about $100,000 a year for a round of that stuff. Ty, it's 16% effective. Isn't that incredible? Just
less than the placebo.
Well, it's amazing. However, the research is showing that if you combine our beta-glucan with Erbitux, it is threefold effective. That's where some of the research is being done. So now universities, major teaching hospitals, private laboratories are looking at this material very seriously. 15, 16 years ago when I got into this, not only was there a lot of ignorance on the immune system, but beta-glucan, people say, huh? And unless you were an immunologist, now immunologists knew about it, but they still didn't know how to really make it in a form that it would be universally effective. And that's kind of my claim to fame is being able to break that puzzle. But now, when you and I get up in the morning, there's not going to be hundreds, there's going to be thousands of PhDs and MDs around the world that are using this material either as a standalone or in conjunction with things like monoclonal antibodies. This is the medicine of the future, Ty. And guess what? It doesn't make your hair fall out. It doesn't make you
no side effects.
Your stomach get ulcerated.
Right.
It doesn't lean over and drool because your brain's turned to mush.
And we can thank AJ, our guest, for developing a manufacturing process for this beta-glucan, which is now affordable for everyone. So thank you for that, AJ. We got another break, unbelievable, but we're up on a break again. We're going to come back. We got one section left, and we're going to try to cover as much material as possible. Stay tuned.
You are listening to The Cancer Truth Chronicles with Ty Bollinger. If you have a question or comment about the show, please send an email to Ty at cancertruth.net. That's TY at cancertruth.net. Now, back to today's program.
Welcome back to the Cancer Truth Chronicles. We're having a great discussion with A.J. Lanigan, and I'm just going to get right back to A.J. here. We've got one section left and a lot of things to cover. A.J., I want to talk about this article that you sent me. It was published in the Journal of Medicinal Food. It's called The Effects of Glucan on Immunosuppressive Actions of Mercury. And the reason I want to talk about this is just a couple weeks ago I had on as a guest Dr. Rashid Buttar, who is an expert at detoxifying heavy metals. And he actually cured his son of autism he had mercury toxicity, and he cured him through different heavy metal chelating agents, EDTA chelation, far infrared saunas, and other therapies that he used to help his son get rid of these toxic metals that were in his system. So let's talk about that article, about the way that beta-glucan can help with mercury, and how are we exposed to different mercury and different heavy metals and other things that are causing disease.
It's funny you mentioned Dr. Buttar. I went to one of his presentations probably, a dozen years ago. He's right down the road from me up in North Carolina, unless he's moved. A real champion, a real hard-working guy, and
he's still there.
All his efforts, but essentially, mercury is a compound that's everywhere in our environment. We burn coal, we burn other fossil fuels. We have for hundreds of years, and basically, because the mercury is in the soil, it then goes up into the air, into the atmosphere. It rains. So mercury it's in our soil, it's in our water. The fish are laden with it. The larger the fish, the more mercury. If you love fish, don't be eating shark. Don't be eating tilefish. Don't be eating, the larger fish, because they have the highest concentrations. Why? Because they eat the medium-sized fish, and the medium-sized fish eat the little fish. So, open a can of sardines, and you'll be a lot cheaper than eating shark and tilefish. But we know that mercury is one of the most toxic compounds on the face of the earth. But yet we've used it in fillings for teeth. We use it as a preservative in vaccines, and which, by the way, has created a lot of brouhaha over the years. We know that it is a toxic substance. We know that it is an immune-suppressing substance. So one of our universities did work demonstrating that, not a hard thing to do. And then we asked the question, will beta-glucan mitigate or forestall or put off the deleterious effects in regards to immune suppression and depression? The simple answer is yes. And so this was, I think, a very, very critical piece of research, because people who have mercury and lead and cadmium and other types of metal poisons and toxins of all types, well, yeah, they can try to chelate and so on and so forth, but the chelation process itself has its own inherent dangers. And so this is a way that people can, again, keep that immune system working better to protect them. It's not going to interfere with any kind of chelation or any other treatments that you're trying to do to get rid of this stuff out of your body. Now, switching gears a little bit, in the area of toxins,
sure.
A study was released earlier this year talking about children's vaccinations, and those vaccinations seemingly having less and less and less effect. And so the scientists are saying, well, wait a minute now, we're using the same stuff. Why are the children not responding? Well, they found that these children are heavily laden with another group of toxins known as PFOAs and PFOSs, and those materials are, again, very, very immune suppressive. Now, where are they getting these? Well, they're getting them everywhere. They're in this non-stick cookware that everybody uses.
Terrible stuff.
They're the coatings on mattresses that you're laying your babies on top of or that you're sleeping on. They're in the carpets. They're in the draperies. I mean, everywhere these things are coating to make them slick or making them fire retardant or making them stain proof. And, of course, that material, when it gets discarded, it goes into the environment. So it's everywhere, Ty. We got to move from the planet. We've got to get away from it. So the reality is,
maybe we need to go to Mars here.
Being bombarded, not just from things like cancer and infectious disease,
right,
but chemicals and toxins like mercury and these perfluoridated materials. Hey, if we don't brush our teeth, what happens? They fall out. If we don't help to maintain and support our immune system, it falls out too, and that's when we start to get stacked up in the hospital like Ford would. And believe me, stay out of the hospital, my friend. Stay out of the hospital.
I'm with you. We could do another show on iatrogenic deaths, doctor-induced deaths, or deaths related to being in hospitals and so on. Run away from hospitals if possible. Hey, you know what? I wanted to talk a little bit about ozone and the effect of the ozone has on cytokines, but we don't have time. What I want to ask you, we only got a couple minutes left. Can you just go down to Walmart and buy any kind of immune supplement on the shelf, or can you go down there and get any kind of beta-glucan supplement and feel good that you have a quality supplement in your hand?
You know, you might be able to go down and get vitamin C that way.
Okay.
Because vitamin C is so cheap and it's so easy to make, nobody's going to cheat on it.
Right.
Not true when it comes to beta-glucan. You've got to really know what you're doing. It's a very time-consuming, a very deliberate process, and my company's been manufacturing it now for 15 or 16 years. Ty, do you know that we discard 90% of the batches that we manufacture?
You know what? I read that. I was amazed that you're so particular.
Animals and so forth.
Yep.
Simply because I think back, if my grandfather were to take this product, I want it to be a certain level of safety, a certain level of purity and potency to deliver him a minimal level of biological activity. So I treat every pill, every bottle, every batch as if my grandfather would have received this material. And I'm sorry to say that in the food supplement industry that the rules of testing and retesting and making sure that purity, potency, and biological activity are there is not the rule of law there. I mean, it's just they just try to get by cheap.
Right. And, you know, that's honestly, folks, that's why one of my sponsors is Transfer Point, the Better Way Health that are distributors of Transfer Point beta-1,3-D glucan. I take it every day. I did the research and found out this to be the highest quality beta-glucan, and I won't endorse something if I don't believe in it. And if I won't endorse it, I don't take it personally. So you've got the best here. AJ Lanigan actually developed it. Click on the link on the website to purchase it. It's right here on the Voice America website, here on my website. So just click it to purchase. AJ, I have so much more I would like to talk to you about, but we're out of time. I want to thank you for being on the show today and sharing with us about ninjas and 4-star generals and recon officers and Pac-Man. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I'm certain that the folks that have been listening have benefited and have learned a lot. So thank you, AJ. We have to do this again.
Thank you, Ty. Looking forward to shaking your hand. You come down to see me sometime, okay?
That sounds good, AJ. Thanks a lot. God bless.
You too.
All right. Folks, it's been a pleasure to have AJ on the show today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Come back next week. We are out of time. Have a great weekend. And please remember, cancer does not have to be a death sentence. I'm Ty Bollinger. This has been the Cancer Truth Chronicles. God bless you all.
We hope you've received some inspiration and much needed information on our show today. Please tune into the Cancer Truth Chronicles with host Ty Bollinger every Friday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. We'll talk again next week.